I'm Andrew Berry. I'm Director of Conservation at Bernheim. I have been at Bernheim for 12 years now. I work in the natural areas on everything from land stewardship to research to land protection. Um, let's move. Let's just see if it'll go here. I think we might have a little bit of a delay. But I'll just start off a little bit about Bernheim. I'm sure you all might be familiar with Bernheim, but I wanted to start by saying, we have a 92-year history working within the greater Louisville area. We have a number of partners that I want to thank. Go back, decades, including the Beckham Bird Club, which works to with Bernheim grants and public research possible. Also, the Kentucky Audubon Council is a great partner who's been very supportive of MODIS. Kentucky is really lucky to have two bird clubs like Beckham and Audubon Council that can head up bird research and bird education and bird outings. So we want to thank them. And we also want to thank Judge Boyce Martin Jr., who is a figure in Bernheim's history, as a member of our board, but also a neighboring landowner and just a real powerful figure in the greater Louisville area for so long. And a lot of his friends and family and colleagues are now supporting the Modus wildlife tracking in his honor. So we want to thank Judge Martin's family so some of you all are probably familiar that birds have declined by 30% over the last 5 decades. These are pretty startling numbers, and we're seeing it across all birds. The birds within the interior forests, the eastern United States, songbirds and migratory birds are decreasing, but we're also seeing particular losses in grassland birds. These are really troubling findings, and they're supported by major studies like one that happened that was published in 2018 by Cornell University that documented these losses. As I mentioned, the eastern fin are gone within the last 5 decades. Eastern meadowlarks, a bird that a lot of us used to see more frequently decades ago, 3 and 4 have been lost. That's 75%, just the last 5 decades. And what's going on is it's a combination of factors, and everything from habitat loss, where Kentucky now loses, on a conservative level, 52 acres per day of natural land. This scene right here is just right next to Bernheim at that new interchange that went in on I-65. But it's also on the other end of the birds' habitats, where a lot of the migratory birds, in Kentucky, end up spending the winter down in places like the Amazon, which have suffered tremendous loss from fire and other habitat conversion over the last decades, which is now accelerating. So these birds leave Bernheim and they're finding less favorable habitats. And then some of the returning birds are finding scenes like this in Appalachia, where you're seeing whole mountainsides just removed and converted. So we've got some big challenges, and I'll talk a little bit about what Bernheim is doing for birds now. Ours is a multifaceted approach that goes back since our founding 90 years ago. It includes bird reintroductions. Some people don't know that Bernheim was actually responsible for helping with the turkey reintroductions in our area. Back in the starting in the 30s, but really being successful in the 1970s and 80s. These are bobwhite quail, which we were active restoring over the last decade, and now we see them throughout our prairies and glades and grasslands, and they've really spread all over the greater Bernheim region too. And we do a lot to connect people with birds, like these volunteers, Jim and Karen Scout, just incredible people that come out to connect with birds, to educate other folks about birds. People like Ren Smith, which have been doing this for decades and really have a deep understanding and passion and ability to just connect people. And we do a lot of bird surveys, like this opportunity here where some children helped with our bird netting. And we do bird banding. And we also have been working over the past few years, I'm just showing a couple of species. We've got 229 species in Bernheim, stuff like the white-eyed vireo, which is kind of common, but you don't see it because it's up in the trees. You don't see it up close for sure. And the screech owl, which you hear quite a bit, but rarely do you get actually lay eyes up close on the screech owl juvenile. And all of these birds live in Bernheim, and we're working with partners like Cellular Tracking Technologies, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. They help us with the golden eagle tracking as well. But we've been working under the Modus Wildlife Tracking Project, which is an international project largely centered around North America, with Birds Canada and a number of groups throughout the United States, and now even down into South America, and over into Europe and Asia. But in particular, the birds that are found within North America, a lot of them are migratory and will move up and down um, the Appalachian corridor or the Mississippi migratory corridor. And the Modus Wildlife Tracking Project seeks to better understand what these migratory pathways are, what kind of habitats are birds using, what's their survivability, and kind of piece all that together. And for songbirds being so small and light and delicate, you really have to use a much smaller device to track them with. And so the technology is just developing and emerging. Bernheim has installed 3 of these sensor stations, they're called, throughout our forest, which allow us to track birds which are tagged flying over. And you can see this one on top of the fire tower, which is the high point within Bernheim, 920-foot elevation. And once you get up 100 foot on top of the fire tower, you can look out all across there. And in this view, you can see all the way to Fort Knox, if you can see where my cursor is. You can see Knob State Forest in the background, which is a really prominent landmark, the classic knobs terrain. And you can see just this sea of green, which is the large forest block that makes up Bernheim and some of the adjacent properties around us, extending over to Fort Knox, which also has a lot of natural land. And so this tower is designed to pick up any of these birds migrating through, and these tags, which are getting smaller every year, and the technology is advancing. These are called life tags. And we've targeted 5 species at Bernheim so far to put these on, including the Louisiana water thrush, Kentucky warbler, the wood thrush, the purple martin. These are members of the watch list for birds which are imperiled or declining. And so, in running this program, which has just been operating for 1 year now in Kentucky, we've tagged 12 birds. So far, the results are mixed. We've only gotten 1 bird back after migration. We got a Louisiana water thrush that returned this year. We would have liked to got our purple martins back. I'm not sure what that means. We tagged 6 of them and didn't get any pings after migration. So they may still be out there. Could be the tag malfunctioned, or the tag didn't last that long, or the birds didn't make it back, or they just ended up somewhere else. So we're hopeful that we can get some of these back, but we've also, well, before I move on to golden eagles, we also have been getting some hits from some other research projects. And one of them is tree swallows from Montezuma Wildlife Refuge up in New York. So that's pretty cool to have our first birds that are being confirmed to migrate from places up north and come down and across Bernheim on their way south. And this network is building right now. We're the only site in Kentucky to have Modus wildlife tracking, but we've had a number of sites pop up in our north-south line in Tennessee. We've had 4 stations in Tennessee pop up. We've had some more in Indiana and Missouri. And so as we build out that infrastructure, we're going to get more and more capability for detecting migratory birds, such as these songbirds. But I think most of you all are on here to talk about golden eagles, and it is golden eagle season. As we move further into November, Birds that nest up in Canada, far up in the north, are making their way down across Kentucky and across the eastern United States on their way south. And some of them stop down here. You know, sometimes these birds that come from the high Arctic, they think that places like Kentucky or even places like Michigan are actually pretty warm in the winter. So we've got a number of golden eagles that are heading down this way right now. You all are probably familiar with some of our history at Bernheim of tracking golden eagles. Actually, the project goes back at least a decade. In 2008, when I came on at Bernheim, we first started camera trapping for golden eagles. So setting out, motion detected cameras, trying to see which eagles and other predators and scavengers we have within the forest. Started getting some amazing images, and then we ended up networking with a group called the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group, which helps to monitor golden eagles largely through trail cameras, but other tracking devices and means, tracking golden eagles all across the eastern United States, which really is a lot of people are familiar with golden eagles out in the Mountain West, or they've seen the stories about them over in Asia and some of the high mountain ranges. But a lot of people aren't aware of their presence in the eastern United States. And they don't breed down here. They don't nest, and they haven't for, we think, centuries. But they do come down here in the winter, and they're around from November to March. At Bernheim, there was actually a golden eagle that was trapped by a neighbor in the 1950s and was on display at Bernheim for the winter of, I think it was 1952. And then there's some records going back into the 1800s of sightings of them around the Louisville area. And there's one in Shawnee Park, famous sighting of a bird that was actually taken and had on display at the Louisville Public Library. So they have been coming down here for a long time. They're coming down to places like Bernheim because of the large forests, the topography, and also the abundance of prey that we have. It just allows them to make it through the winter. So these two birds that we're seeing on the screen here are Athena and Harper. Athena is a little bit larger than Harper. She's on the left, he's on the right. They are two birds that have become, I guess, pretty famous, and maybe two of the more famous golden eagles in the world right now. And we know so much about them because we've been able to track them for a number of years. This is Athena here again. These are pictures that we get during our research through the winter, where we figure out where they're hanging out, we figure out where they're roosting, and in this situation, we're actually able to put a camera in a tree on a branch, which these golden eagles use year after year, and they're very they're very dependable for hitting these key locations, and we're probably going to do this again this year, where they'll be sitting on that branch. This is Harper. He's a little bit smaller, using the same branch, alternating with Athena. If you're wondering, Harper is, the males of the species are a little smaller. He was about 9 pounds and some change. Athena was 11 pounds, and so a little bit larger. Their wingspan, we never actually measured the entire wingspan, but their wingspan is thought to be probably around 9 foot. This is a picture from the same branch of a juvenile golden eagle. This is, I'll talk a little bit about it later in the presentation, but we've got some big questions about whether these juvenile golden eagles, which are seen interacting with Harper and Athena, whether they might be related. I mean, we can't really figure out why this pair would tolerate other juvenile eagles coming in around where they're feeding and in their territory. And it might be that they know each other. It might be that they're related. So really cool questions remain. And then there's a lot of other raptors, like this bald eagle. And there's a number of bald eagles that are in Bernheim year round, and they grow in number through the winter. And that's because, just like the golden eagles, you've got a bunch of bald eagles up in northern Canada, which also have to migrate down into the United States to survive. I mean, for those of y'all who are familiar, with what northern Canada would look like in the winter. It's just inhospitable. Everything is frozen and the lakes are frozen. So even our toughest birds can't make it through those winters up there. They're coming down to Bernheim for several reasons. They're coming, as I mentioned before, for the large forest blocks. They love big, huge expanses of natural land. Up in Canada, they're in, just deep, deep wilderness. And this is about as good as it gets for when you get down into the lower 48. Places like Bernheim at over 16,000 acres provide enough territory for them. And places like Golden Eagle Ridge, which are within that large forest matrix, but have these open habitats, which they can hunt around and roost and get view sheds. Um, this is our partners, Cellular Tracking Technologies. This is the same folks that help us with the songbird tracking. And you'll recognize the guy on the right is Mike Lanzone. He's the CEO of Cellular Tracking, and his wife, Dr. Tricia Miller. She is the CEO of Conservation Global Science Incorporated, and she got her PhD in the Eastern Golden Eagles, and one of the world's leading experts, not only in knowledge about the golden eagles, but also in the capture and tracking of golden eagles. So her and Mike, together with their company, actually created these GPS tracking devices, like you see here on this eagle, which is Harper, and it's a solar device, and so this is able to operate, and power up on its own. Some of these devices are over 7 years old now and still operating. And it stores up GPS locations of these golden eagles. And when they encounter a cellular tower, so just, your basic cell tower like we have around all over Kentucky in the lower 48, when they encounter them at 2 o'clock, it downloads all of their data. And so you can see where they've been. It gives you information on altitude, speed, some temperature and activity level for the bird. So really incredible devices. And we've had this device on Harper, and it's been operating since 2018. So that's February of 2018. And then Athena has had one on her since January of 2019. And just imagine how often you have to reset your phone or restart your computer. Well, these devices are running in very complete exposure to the sun and to the weather and the elements, and they're still going. So I'm really impressed with this technology. And the reason you're able to put something so large on golden eagles is because they're golden eagles. They're big birds that can carry more weight than songbirds, and it just has more capabilities for the computer. And so when we first started tracking Harper, Bernheim was so excited. We had known for decades that we had these golden eagles, but that was all we really knew. We didn't know where they went to, where they came from. Were these the same birds that we're seeing year after year? All these questions existed, and to hook up with this Eastern Golden Eagle working group and to be able to track them was just phenomenal for our own understanding and for our outreach. And so we learned in that first year with Harper, he was moving along a corridor, kind of the Mississippi Flyway, which goes off of the west coast of Lake Superior in Duluth, Minnesota. And then he would go up and across Ontario through Manitoba to a place called Wapusk National Park. And that's just south of Churchill, Manitoba. So Churchill, Manitoba is a classic wilderness destination in Canada. It's right on the Hudson Bay, and it's where you go if you want to see polar bears or beluga whales, or if you want to see something like the Northern Lights. It's incredible up there. And then after spending a summer there, we saw Harper fly a little bit different course, but pretty much the same. He always comes right off of that tip of Duluth, and then he heads down through Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. And as we track him, we're able to generate these maps in three-dimensional view of what he's doing. And you can see just, incredible stuff happening, elevations of 6,388 feet as he flies by Rockford, Illinois. not far from Chicago. And you can see how he's going up and down, and he's using these thermals to soar up and then do these long descents where he's saving his energy. He's migrating, over 1,500 miles, and he's saving his energy by just going up and then soaring down. So learning how they're migrating, how they're, what some of their strategies are, it's just been incredible. Um, the area he was at when he's up there in Canada is called the Hudson Bay Lowlands, and I mentioned how how much of a wilderness it is, and part of that is because of the amount of wetland up there. And I have not made it this far north yet, um, into the Hudson Bay, but I've been, some places in British Columbia and in other parts of Canada, and you realize how quickly you're so limited in how you can get around because everything in the summer is squishy or there's water, there's a lot of bugs. It's just really a tough habitat to get around. And the reason these eagles are going there is partly because there aren't any people around to bother them, but also they're feeding upon these huge migrations of waterfowl, which arrive up there in the summer and which also breed and support their young on these same lakes and wetlands as the golden eagles. And this is a picture of the lake of where Harper went to that first year, and we call it Harper Lake. And looking at this picture from Google Earth, it looks small, but actually this lake I think was 700 and something acres. So a really large lake, and they're just all over the place. And then in between, it's just dotted with wetlands and other interesting terrain. And so, we had noticed with Harper that he did have a companion, and we had seen him, interacting with another golden eagle. We had seen him on the trail cameras feeding with another golden eagle and switching back and forth. And it looked like there was some cooperation happening. So we talked to Dr. Tricia Miller again and Mike at Cellular Tracking Technologies, and then we got them back down to try to track another one. And we were going to try to capture Harper's mate. And it's tough to do because you've got to not only get the right one, but you've got to get them together to figure out that it was the Harper's companion that we were going to track. And to be honest, we would have taken any golden eagle if we weren't able to get this one. But it worked out that after 2 days of sitting out in the blind with them, which is always incredible. It's very cold. It's long days. The first day it was below freezing, and we sat for 12 hours, and we saw the golden eagles, but they wouldn't get on the bait site. And they were actually interacting with a third golden eagle, and we would see the two fighting. We actually saw at one point golden eagle came and hit one out of a tree. And so there's a lot of bait guarding. There's a lot of territory defending. And there's more golden eagles than just Harper and Athena in Bernheim. So there's some interesting stuff happening. But the second day, just at the end of the day, 5 o'clock, right before dark, we were able to capture Athena. And Athena, at the time, we called her Goldie. Actually, that was my original name for her. But then we did a naming process again, and Athena won. And so her name was changed to Athena. And it wasn't very long. Just took just a matter of hours of us to get some of this data back off of her GPS to see that her and Harper were hanging out together. And then for the rest of the winter, we saw these two birds roosting together every night. We saw them soaring together, visiting other properties around Bernheim. We saw them around bait sites, and so we were really excited. We were saying, "Oh, this is we've got a pair of golden eagles." But when they took off and they left Bernheim, we were kind of shocked. Not only did they leave at different times, Harper just took off one morning and left Athena behind, and then she waited a few hours, and then she flew off in a different direction. And so we were wondering, is this just a winter companionship, or are they not even a breeding pair? Could we even have been wrong about it being a male and female? So they went different directions, and they headed to opposite ends of Lake Superior. And you can see this map from late March of 2019, where we're seeing Athena in red heading right up through Michigan, crossing here at the Straits of Mackinac, which, if anybody's ever been up there, that's an incredible crossover for migratory birds. And they've got a hawk watch up there that can sit, people sit and watch and count, hundreds of golden eagles going over each year, passing right over this spot, because there's not a lot of areas for birds past the Great Lakes. And so these crossings, like this one up here in Mackinac, is so important. And to see her using it, I mean, I was, we were so excited. It was great to see two golden eagles using different migratory paths from Bernheim, but we thought that these two golden eagles were not going to link back up. But we were wrong. And they did link back up. And I'll show you this map now. This is a map. Actually, this is fall of 2019. So this is on their way back, but it's generally the same route. But you can see what happens here with Athena again in red and Harper in blue, how they go apart. And at one point on opposite sides of Lake Superior, they're almost 400 miles apart. And then the two come back together across Ontario and make their way back up to Churchill and reunite. And the way they reunite is fantastic. I mean, I think last year Harper took a little bit more time. Athena made it back to where their nest is, and they have two nests that they maintain on two lakes side by side. And she waited there. It was just within a matter of hours that Harper came from another direction and flew straight back in. And then they reunite. They spend a little bit of time together. And then they'll split up again and fly around and hunt some, but they always keep coming back together around those nests. Just incredible to see, how birds that would be mates could use separate migratory pathways to get, at a distance of close to 1,700 miles. They fly between the two destinations and come right back together. I don't know how that would have started, or how, whether they would have met up in Canada and become a pair and then flown back to Bernheim, or if they flew together at one time and now have decided they'd rather do it separately. I don't know. A lot of questions still exist. And, in the world of ornithology, this is also new information. This is the first time that a pair of golden eagles has been tracked together. And so the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group, I mean, they're loving this stuff. This is incredible information that we're getting. And to see that a pair migrate separately, it's really interesting. It's going to be a great publication, and we're still gathering information, and we're still gathering more details about their migrations and what they do on either end of it. So at some point, we're going to sit down and tell the whole story in scientific journals, and I think it's really going to be incredible. This is a picture of their data from June 12th, 2019, up there on those lakes. And I mentioned, they hang out around this whole series of large lakes. And they've got two nests. This is the one that they were using in 2019. In 2018, before we were tracking Athena, we knew that Harper was hanging out around this nest right here. So they have two spots that they maintain, and that's common for golden eagles to maintain a couple of nests, two, maybe even three. But I wanted to show this one. Again, Harper is shown in the blue and Athena is shown in the red. And you can see for this day, June 12th, and this was common throughout that whole year, Athena was very close to that nest. And she's so close that it looks like there's only 3 points, but there's, a lot of points just right on top of each other. And then you see Harper in the blue, and he's flying all around. And you can see by the arrows that he's coming, he's going, he's zipping around, flying out over the lake. He's doing two things. He's defending the nest and the territory, but he's also out hunting, because right now at June 12th, this is when they would have had a chick in the nest. Athena is stuck on the nest, defending and caring for that chick, 23 hours of the day. About an hour she would leave and fly around a little bit. But Harper, his whole job is just hunting, just bringing back food, and it's really labor intensive, and it's probably it's probably more work than he wants to do sometimes. But this is how wild animals and golden eagles and stuff survive. Cooperation on the nest is critical, and long-term companionship and pairing is, happening in golden eagles just like it happens in humans, how we cooperate for the, you know raising of our children. um, so at this point, I'll skip ahead a little bit to where we're at this year. Okay, so you all probably seen some of the stories that have come out. We've had a few blogs about what the Golden Eagles are doing. At this point, Athena has made it back. I will say this year, their behavior up there in the Canadian breeding territory was a lot different. We saw last year, I'm pretty sure that we saw nesting behavior that probably fledged a golden eagle chick. I mean, they were working and cooperating on the nest all the way through, and the timing really matches up with what it would have taken for them to raise a chick. And then you can see them slowly moving around and away from the nest. But this year it was really different. So we saw them reunite up there in Churchill, but then we saw Harper spend more time further from the nest hunting. He would make regular trips back. And then Athena actually left the nest area for a while too and was doing more hunting. And they were coming back together, but they were also spending more time apart. And it really looks like they weren't hanging around a nest enough that they would have raised hatched an egg and raised a chick. So it may have been that they took a year off. We're still going through all the data. That certainly would make sense. I mean, you can imagine how labor intensive it is to raise young every year. And so for a large, bird, an apex predator like the golden eagle, maybe a strategy is take a year off. And I've read that in other places too, that you could skip a year. Um, and so then, the Golden Eagles kind of did a little more. They had a little more independence this past summer in 2020. And then they took off, and October 9th, Athena headed back towards Bernheim. Harper left a few days later. You can see here dotted in pink, either two routes, and how they kind of, almost follow the same path. They both cross over near a little town called York Factory on Hudson Bay. It's like an old, one of those old, uh, you know, outposts there in the wilderness. And from there, Harper really heads south, and then Athena kind of makes her way a little bit more to the east down towards Lake Superior. um, I don't know, some of you probably have been up into this northern Great Lakes country and know how incredible it is, and how wild it gets once you go north of, Green Bay and Sault Ste. Marie. I'm really interested in what Athena does when she comes down, and she goes to a place. She's done this the past 2 years. A place called Pecasqua um, National Park, which is one of the wildest coastlines of Lake Superior. She goes near the Lake Superior Provincial Park. Um, it's just really, really incredible wilderness up there. This year, she did something a little bit different too. She jumped over Lake Superior onto Michipicoten Island, which is a wilderness island out in the middle of the lake, and flew across the length of it, which was, something we hadn't seen before. Um, so she made her way pretty quickly, and she's all the way back down in Bernheim. But then Harper, he's really taken his time. He is just now getting down into Illinois, and he spent a little extra time in this western Wisconsin area, which really seems to hold a special significance to him. We see him do that year after year, where he gets, just north of that Madison, Wisconsin line. And when you go northwest of Madison, Wisconsin, the terrain changes. It's called the driftless area, and it's really hilly and a lot of terrain, a lot of forest. And he spends a lot of time in there, and apparently a lot of other golden eagles do too, because they're pretty common, in eBird and other places being reported. If you go on eBird and you like looking at species reporting, if you look for the golden eagle, you'll see that all throughout this corridor where Harper migrates, there are sightings of golden eagles. People don't know they're there that much. Even in Chicago, there's a lot of sightings. And we saw Harper travel through the Chicago area in the past. And right now, as of yesterday, he actually is just 50 miles outside of downtown Chicago.
Hmm.
So you can imagine he's viewing the skyline. That, as he's flying along, he went down the Fox River. If you follow my cursor, Fox River picked up the Illinois River, and there's a number of little state parks and natural areas dotted along through here. But right now he's just 20 miles out of Joliet. I think that's how you pronounce it. He flew right past Rockford, so he's passing by some pretty big towns, and he's flying over the Midwest, which is really daunting for these migratory birds. Your habitat is completely destroyed. You've got vast expanses of bare corn stubble and other farmland right now. And then there's a lot of development and urban areas and people in there too. So it's just tough for a golden eagle flying through here. He's probably going to speed it up and make his way back into Bernheim. I'm going to guess within the next week. And the winds play a big part in this too. So you'll see him travel a lot during times when the wind's coming out of the north. I think over the next couple of days, we're getting some winds out of the south, which is good for us in a little warmer weather. But for a golden eagle flying south, it'll slow them down a little bit. Um, this is just a few pictures. This year, our plans, of course, the whole COVID pandemic has set a lot of research projects back, but the golden eagles are going to be able to continue just because we're able to get out in the field. We're not going to be able to do as many blind sits and things that we would do with a group of people, where we would all be sitting together in a blind. This year we're all going to be sitting separately and probably doing a lot of individual work, but we're going to keep collecting images. And I tell you, one of the things that we're doing is starting to look for another pair of golden eagles at Bernheim. So we know we've got Harper and Athena, and we know where they're at. So it makes it easier for us whenever we get pictures of golden eagles from other areas in Bernheim to tell that that's not Harper and Athena. We can cross them off the list and know who the new individuals are. And we're actually looking for a new pair, and there's a possibility we might try to track another pair in the future, see if they're going to the same area, see if maybe some of these eagles are coming down out of the Appalachian Mountains, out of the other side of the Hudson Bay, the eastern side of it. I think there's still a lot left to learn about golden eagles at Bernheim. And working with this Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group, we've been able to get data from 20 golden eagles that either have been in Kentucky for a period or have migrated through Kentucky. And we've seen that some of these golden eagles have actually been going into the areas where Harper and Athena are at in Bernheim. They come into Bernheim and will visit for sometimes just for a day. Sometimes we'll stay for a little bit longer and pop around in the knobs. But it shows that Bernheim is one of these, stopover destinations that golden eagles have been using probably for centuries to make it through the winter in the lower 48. So we got a lot of mysteries to unravel. It's a great story for outreach. It's a great opportunity for people to get excited that we've still got these kinds of large apex predators migrating down to Bernheim. It's a great story for large forests and why we need to protect places like Bernheim, why we need to protect wildlife corridors. It's an international story that really gives us something to call some researchers up in Canada and talk to them about this. And just in the last few days, I've had a number of great conversations with the folks in Mackinac. I mentioned that Athena migrates through Michigan over the Mackinac Straits. They actually saw her this year fly over, and they're doing a story about it. And we can, we know this because they wrote down when they saw a golden eagle, and we know when she flew over with the GPS, and we can say that's the same eagle. And we're going to try to get a sighting of her when she migrates back up there in the spring, and they're going to try to actually watch for her to come over. So that'll be a pretty cool opportunity. Next year, we're going to host the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group at Bernheim. We were going to do it in 2021. Of course, nobody's traveling, so it's going to be a virtual meeting. But hopefully in 2022, we're gonna host this Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group at Bernheim, and we're going to start unveiling a conservation plan for the Eastern United States. And it's not, Bernheim's not driving this. Of course, we're facilitating work that happens in Bernheim, but this larger Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group with people like Dr. Miller and Dr. Todd Katzner are developing this Eastern Golden Eagle conservation plan, which I think is going to be really important for us to figure out how to keep this species around. Because they've got a lot of challenges over the coming decades and centuries. This is just a little bit about it. I think we've got a few minutes. I'd like to take some questions if we can. Any questions?
Andrew, so we have a question from Margie. She's asking, how far do they range around Bernheim?
That's a good question. So the core of their territory around Bernheim is about 5,000 acres. And it goes everywhere from Knob State Forest, which is, it's over there by I-65. They don't like to cross I-65 too much. And then it goes through the middle of Bernheim. And of course, Bernheim is 16,140 acres. And so we think that since Harper and Athena really have that core in the middle of Bernheim, there could be some of these other pairs that are using other parts and overlapping maybe a little bit with it. But they'll fly a little bit further. Sometimes they'll cross I-65. We've seen them go over to Fort Knox a couple of times. We've seen them cross the Bluegrass Parkway down into Nelson County, into some of the knobs down there a couple of times too. But in general, they like to stay pretty tight within that Bernheim area. I think they feel safe. Any other questions?
And then we got a question. What is the status of the golden eagles in the wild? Are they endangered?
That's a great question. So it depends on where you're at. In the wild, golden eagles are found all over the world. They're found throughout the northern hemisphere. Of course, the western United States, from Alaska all the way down the Rockies into Mexico. There's a pretty good population there. In the eastern U.S., there are definitely a lot fewer. They think there's probably fewer than 4,000 individuals in the eastern United States. Over in Europe, they're definitely declining. They're up in Scandinavia, Russia. They range all the way down into places like Israel, where they're endangered down there also. So across the world, there are lots of different populations of various, levels of protectedness, and they say in some areas they're doing well, but in other areas they do definitely seem to be plummeting. I think that, for a bird like this, that is so large, that is so dependent upon, large prey and be able to hunt in larger wild areas, the future for them probably is going to be really challenging. We're going to see more people. We're going to see more fragmentation. And we're seeing more people moving out into the wilderness, into the mountains, and even around Bernheim, we're seeing continued, chopping up of natural areas for suburbs and small farmsteads. And that's pushing golden eagles out. And I think there's going to be big challenges over the coming centuries. And you got to protect places like Bernheim and large forest blocks if we're going to keep them around in the eastern U.S. for sure.
And then a common question has been, where's the best place to potentially view the eagles at Bernheim, and around what time?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do Eagle Week. We had one last year, and we did a bunch of tours down to see the golden eagles, and there was pretty good success. We go down Harrison Fork Road into the Wilson Creek area, The best time to view them is between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And clear days where there's some good winds and they'll start soaring. That's generally the best time. It's tough if you haven't been down Harrison Fork Road or don't have good access getting down that road, which has a few stream crossings. I wouldn't advise it in a car. But stay tuned. As soon as we get through this pandemic and we start doing public programs again like that, where we can get everybody in a van, we're going to have more opportunities to go see them at Bernheim. Within the Arboretum, they very rarely venture that far north. And Athena actually came up to the to Lake Nevin last year and sat in a tree right there near the Sunset Amphitheater, but that's very rare. So you probably won't see them in the Arboretum, but you could see a bald eagle. So, you never know what you'll see out there.
Another question is what do they eat at Bernheim in particular?
So they do a lot of scavenging at Bernheim. They like to scavenge deer. I mean, it's a large meal that can last several days. But they also do some hunting, and we've documented them hunting turkey. And we find where they actually prey on the turkey and pull the feathers out and eat them. And also, we've come across them with a fresh kill of a possum. One had just killed a possum and had gone in and was pulling out some of the organs and eating them. But we think they probably eat everything from rabbit to squirrel. Golden eagles are known to eat large prey up to small deer, small coyote. Probably not too common that they're doing that, but they've got the capabilities, and and they do a little bit of cooperative hunting, although I have not been able to document that at Bernheim yet, but it is documented in other places where a pair will actually drive prey towards each other or cooperate to take prey out. Really cool. Apex predators, probably they are the most diverse predator that we have at Bernheim.
And last question is they want to know if they compete with bald eagles.
Yeah, they do. So the golden eagles and the bald eagles compete at the bait sites, and whoever wins, sometimes it seems like it just depends on who's hungriest. But we'll see the bald eagles run the golden eagles off times. Then we'll see the golden eagles push bald eagles off. There's a really large and aggressive bald eagle around Bernheim he's almost undefeated. But at the same time, I've seen a possum, a really large possum that hangs around those bait sites every year. And you would think, I've seen a golden eagle eating a possum, so you would think possums would be scared. But I saw that possum run out of the bushes and chase a golden eagle off the bait site one time, and then start feeding while the golden eagle sat in a tree and watched it. And so, sometimes weird things happen in the wild. Sometimes it's just who's feeling confident and brave enough that day.
I think that's it for questions.
Folks, I always enjoy talking about birds, talking about Bernheim, golden eagles. Hope we can get back together and do one of these soon. I think I have another one coming up next month for the Save Bernheim LG&E pipeline. I will say we're going to have a public comment campaign that's going to be starting up next week, commenting on the water quality certification for this proposed LG&E pipeline. So stay tuned. We're going to get a lot of messages out around that, and we hope we can get everybody writing letters. And we really appreciate everybody's support on birds and fighting the pipeline and everything else that goes on out at Bernheim. So thank you all.